When dignity becomes your greatest inheritance, the champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched them from across the room. My cousins, Sabrina and James Harrington, golden children of Charleston society, laughing as they collected compliments like trophies. I stood in the corner of Grandfather George's 70th birthday celebration, invisible as always, despite wearing the same Harrington blood in my veins. "Elena," Sabrina's voice cut through the party chatter, her perfect smile never reaching her eyes. "Be a dear and check if the caterers need help with the dessert course. Not 'would you mind' or 'could you please,' just a command, as natural as breathing to her." I nodded, swallowing the familiar bitterness that rose in my throat. At 29 years old, I was still the family's unofficial help, despite my degree from Parsons and my growing design portfolio. "And bring more champagne when you come back," James added with a dismissive wave, not even looking at me as he turned back to impress some banking executive. This was my life as Elena Harrington, the cousin who wasn't quite Harrington enough. I made my way through Grandfather George's marble-floored mansion, the very home I'd grown up in after my parents died. The same home Sabrina and James treated as their entertainment venue while contributing nothing to its upkeep. The home that had become both my sanctuary and my prison. Little did I know that night would be the beginning of the end, the first domino in a sequence that would change everything. I didn't always live in the shadows of my family name. There was a time when being a Harrington meant something different to me. Warm Christmas mornings with my parents, the smell of my father's cologne as he lifted me onto his shoulders, my mother's laughter echoing through these same halls. But pneumonia doesn't discriminate between the worthy and unworthy parents of this world. At 7 years old, I became the ward of my grandfather, George Harrington, Charleston's real estate mogul and philanthropist. My cousins, already teenagers when I arrived, established the hierarchy quickly. "She's like a little doll," Sabrina had said, pinching my cheek too hard. "I'll teach her how to behave." Their mother, Aunt Patricia, had simply nodded. "She'll need guidance to uphold the Harrington name." 22 years later, their guidance had morphed into subtle servitude. I managed Grandfather's household while they paraded around Charleston with his money. I arranged his medical appointments while they networked at galas. I listened to his stories while they interrupted family dinners with self-important announcements. The Monday after Grandfather's birthday party, I was in my studio apartment above the garage working on design sketches for a boutique hotel project, my real passion and growing side business, when my phone buzzed with Sabrina's name. "Elena, darling," her voice dripped with honey-coated demands. "We're having a family dinner at the main house tonight. 6 sharp. I glanced at my calendar, already filled with a client meeting. "I have a work commitment." "Reschedule it," she interrupted. "This is family. It's important." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at my phone, a familiar tension gathering between my shoulder blades. In Sabrina's world, my work, my dreams, were always disposable. At 6 o'clock, I sat at Grandfather's mahogany dining table, wearing a simple black dress that Sabrina had once described as sensible like you. James was late, as usual. Aunt Patricia fussed over Grandfather's medications while her husband, Uncle Robert, poured himself a generous whiskey. Sabrina entered last, a vision in designer silk, her dark hair arranged in an elegant updo. "Sorry I'm late. The charity board meeting ran over." No one mentioned that I had arrived on time despite rescheduling a potential client. No one ever did. Dinner proceeded with the usual performance, Sabrina highlighting her social conquests, James bragging about his latest business deal that somehow never materialized, Uncle Robert nodding proudly at their fabricated achievements. Then, over dessert, Sabrina cleared her throat dramatically. "I have wonderful news," she announced. "Henry Wallace is back in town." The table fell silent. Henry Wallace was Charleston royalty, old money, impeccable connections, and CEO of Wallace Investments. His approval could open any door in the city. "I've secured an invitation for us to his New Year's gala," Sabrina continued. It took some maneuvering, but she flashed a practiced, modest smile. James leaned forward eagerly. "Wallace Investments is looking to back new projects in the historic district. This could be huge for us." Uncle Robert raised his glass. "To the Harrington name opening doors." I sat quietly, pushing my cake around the plate. The Harrington name had opened nothing for me except the back entrance to service positions in my own home. "But," Sabrina continued, her eyes suddenly sliding to me, "we need to make a favorable impression before the gala. I've told Henry about our family's traditional Christmas Eve dinner." My fork froze midway to my mouth. We had no such tradition. I mentioned how Elena hosts the most exquisite holiday gathering at the mansion, she said, smiling directly at me now. For our closest business associates. The room swiveled toward me. I felt the blood drain from my face. We don't have a traditional Christmas dinner, I said carefully. Sabrina laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Don't be modest. Elena. I've already invited 25 of Charleston's most influential people. Henry was particularly impressed that we maintain such elegant family traditions. 25 people? I echoed, the number seeming to expand in my mind. Nothing you can't handle, James cut in, smirking. You're good at serving. Grandfather George, who had been quietly observing, frowned slightly. Sabrina, did you consult Elena before making these arrangements? Sabrina waved her hand dismissively. It's the family home, grandfather. Elena lives here rent-free. It's the least she can do to contribute. The words stung more than she knew. I didn't live rent-free. I managed the entire estate, from hiring staff to maintaining the historic property, all while building my design career in stolen hours. It's Christmas Eve, I said, finding my voice. I might have plans. The table fell silent again, this time with a different tension. The idea that I might have a life outside their needs seemed inconceivable to them. What plans could you possibly have? James snorted. Sabrina's smile tightened. Elena, this dinner could secure the Wallace connection. It's crucial for the family's future. Your future, I corrected quietly. Aunt Patricia gasped. Uncle Robert frowned. Sabrina's eyes narrowed dangerously. Elena? Grandfather intervened, his voice gentle but firm. Let's discuss this later. I nodded, choking back words that had been building for years. Later never came with the Harringtons. Later was where dreams and dignity went to die. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room, Grandfather pulled me aside. You don't have to do this, Elena, he whispered, his eyes, so like my father's, searching my face. For a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding, of recognition for the position I'd been placed in. But then Sabrina called for him, and the moment passed. He squeezed my hand once before joining the others, leaving me alone in the dimly lit hallway. That night, as I drove back to my studio above the garage, a plan began forming in my mind. For years, I had bent to their will, swallowed my pride, played the role of the grateful orphan. But something inside me had finally snapped. If Sabrina wanted a Christmas Eve dinner so badly, she would have one, but it wouldn't be the one she expected. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There, waiting for a response, was an invitation I'd been considering for weeks, a design conference in Florida, all expenses paid, including a showcase opportunity for my portfolio. The dates, December 22nd to December 27th. With steady fingers, I typed 2 words, I accept. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparations, though not the kind Sabrina imagined. While she sent me daily texts with demands for the Christmas Eve dinner, 7 courses minimum, Elena. Don't embarrass us with something simple. I was making my own arrangements. I booked a flight to Florida departing Christmas Eve morning. I confirmed my attendance at the design conference. And most importantly, I scheduled a meeting with Henry Wallace himself, who would be attending the same conference as a keynote speaker. He had no idea of my connection to the Harringtons, and I intended to keep it that way. Meanwhile, I played along with Sabrina's charade. I nodded when she dropped by unannounced to check on preparations. I listened as she dictated the guest list, a who's who of Charleston's elite, including 3 bank executives, 2 state politicians, and several old money families whose approval she desperately sought. Make sure the table settings are impeccable, she instructed, running her finger along Grandfather's antique sideboard, checking for dust. The Wallaces appreciate attention to detail. Of course, I replied, my tone pleasant, betraying nothing of my plans. James was worse, if possible. He'd taken to dropping hints about potential business deals he hoped to secure during his Christmas dinner. Wallace's son might be interested in my real estate venture, he mentioned casually one afternoon, sprawled in Grandfather's study as if he owned it. Make sure he's seated near me. I nodded, adding it to my notebook of demands that would never be fulfilled. As Christmas approached, Sabrina's boasting about the dinner reached new heights. At a family Sunday lunch, she held court, describing the event as if it were already a legendary success. Elena has outdone herself with the preparations, she announced, not even glancing in my direction. The Harrington Christmas Eve dinner will be the event of the season. Aunt Patricia beamed with pride, while Uncle Robert nodded approvingly. No one asked what I thought about hosting 25 strangers during what should have been a personal holiday. No one wondered if I had my own Christmas wishes. Except, perhaps, grandfather. I caught him watching me that afternoon, his eyes thoughtful. He found me later in the kitchen, away from the others. "You've been quiet about this dinner, Elena," he said, his voice low. I busied myself with washing dishes, just focused on the details. He leaned against the counter, studying me with eyes that had seen nearly 8 decades of human nature. "You know, your father never let anyone push him around, not even me." The mention of my father made my hands still in the soapy water. Grandfather rarely spoke of his son, my dad. He valued his dignity above all else. Grandfather continued. Said it was the one thing no one could take unless you gave it away. I looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, I wondered if he knew, if he could sense my rebellion brewing. But his expression remained unreadable. "I haven't forgotten," I said finally. He nodded once, patted my shoulder, and left me to my thoughts. 3 days before Christmas, I received a call that nearly derailed everything. It was Henry Wallace's assistant. "Mr. Wallace regrets to inform you that he needs to reschedule your meeting at the conference," she explained. "An unexpected business matter requires his attention in Charleston on Christmas Eve." My heart sank. Christmas Eve? He'll be in Charleston? Yes, he mentioned attending a family dinner that evening, but he's offered to meet with you on the 26th instead. The irony wasn't lost on me. Henry Wallace would indeed be at a Harrington dinner on Christmas Eve, just not the one Sabrina had promised him. For a moment, I considered canceling my plans. The potential fallout from my absence would be significant. Sabrina would never forgive me. James would use it as proof of my unworthiness. The family reputation, at least their version of it, would suffer. That evening, I sat in my studio, surrounded by sketches of my latest design project, a coastal retreat that blended modern aesthetics with environmental sustainability. My phone buzzed with yet another text from Sabrina. Reminder: Wallace expects excellence. Don't disappoint the family. I stared at those words, the family, and realized something fundamental. In Sabrina's mind, the family had never included me. I was the Shadow Harrington, useful for service but never for celebration. My phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Elena Harrington?" a deep voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking. This is Henry Wallace. My assistant mentioned our scheduling conflict." I straightened in my chair, professionalism taking over. "Mr. Wallace, thank you for calling personally. I understand completely. The 26th works perfectly for me." Good, he said, then paused. "Harrington? Any relation to George Harrington of Charleston?" The moment of truth. I could claim my heritage, use the connection Sabrina so desperately wanted, or I could stand on my own merits. "He's my grandfather," I admitted. "But my work stands separate from the family name. I'd prefer to discuss my designs on their own terms." A moment of silence, then a surprising chuckle. Refreshing. Approach. I respect that. After we ended the call, I made my decision. I wouldn't cancel my trip. I wouldn't bow to Sabrina's demands. For once, I would choose myself. The day before Christmas Eve, I packed my suitcase with careful precision. Portfolio, conference clothes, and a swimsuit for the Florida sunshine. I left no note, set no automated responses. I would simply be gone. That night, I stood in the moonlit garden behind the mansion, looking up at the windows that had witnessed my childhood, my grief, and my quiet submission. Tomorrow, those same windows would witness something entirely different. My phone vibrated with one final text from Sabrina. "Don't forget to polish grandfather's silver candelabras for tomorrow. The caterers arrive at noon." I smiled at the screen, then turned it off completely. For the first time in 22 years, I felt the weight of the Harrington name lift from my shoulders. Tomorrow, Sabrina and James would learn that even the most reliable doormat could eventually move, and I would be 30,000 feet in the air, finally breathing freely. Christmas Eve morning dawned with a pale winter sun that bathed Charleston's historic streets and I. Golden light. Most families were waking to the anticipation of holiday traditions, last-minute gift wrapping, and the comforting certainty of togetherness. I was packing my rental car at 5:30 a.m. With methodical precision, I loaded my suitcase, my portfolio case, and a small cooler of snacks for the drive to the airport. The mansion stood silent behind me, its windows dark, its occupants still, sleeping. Grandfather would be up soon for his morning coffee, but he rarely ventured to the garage apartment. No one would notice my absence for hours. As I closed the trunk, a familiar voice froze me in place. Going somewhere, Elena? I turned to find grandfather standing on the path, wearing his navy robe and holding his walking cane. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. Grandfather, I said, my heart pounding. I was just planning your escape, he finished, but there was no anger in his tone, just a hint of something that might have been amusement. I straightened my shoulders, refusing to lie. I'm attending a design conference in Florida. I have a flight to catch. On Christmas Eve? He took a step closer. The day of Sabrina's grand dinner? It's not Sabrina's dinner, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. It's a fiction she created to impress people. There are no caterers coming, no preparations made, no dinner at all. To my surprise, grandfather chuckled, the sound turning to mist in the cold air. And you're leaving them to discover this on their own? They never asked if I agreed to host, I said. They simply assumed I would serve as always. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes, so like my father's, taking my measure. Finally, he nodded. Your father would have done the same. He never let anyone mistake his kindness for weakness. The mention of my father sent a pang through my chest. Are you going to stop me? Grandfather shook his head slowly. No, Elena. I think it's about time someone taught Sabrina and James that actions have consequences. He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a small envelope. But before you go, take this. I accepted it cautiously. What is it? Just a little something for your trip. Don't open it until you're on the plane. He stepped forward and, in a rare gesture of affection, kissed my forehead. Merry Christmas, Elena. I believe this one might be memorable for all of us. With those cryptic words, he turned and walked back toward the house, his cane tapping softly against the stone path. I stood frozen for a moment, the envelope clutched in my hand. Then, checking my watch, I slipped it into my purse and got into the car. I had a plane to catch and a new chapter to begin. The Charleston airport was decorated with garlands and twinkling lights. Christmas. Music playing softly through the speakers. I moved through security in a daze, still processing grandfather's unexpected support. As I settled into my gate, my phone buzzed in my purse. Sabrina. Just confirming the caterers are set for 5 p.m. Send me photos of the table setting before guests arrive. I smiled to myself and turned off my phone. By the time Sabrina realized there would be no Christmas dinner, I would be in Florida, watching the ocean. Boarding began, and as I found my seat by the window, I felt a peculiar lightness. For the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's assistant, organizer, or background character. I was just Elena, a designer heading to a professional conference, a woman making her own choices. As the plane taxied down the runway, I remembered grandfather's envelope. I pulled it from my purse and carefully opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. Elena, this was meant to be your Christmas gift, but I think you might need it sooner. Consider it seed money for your design business, or whatever else you choose to build. Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become, even if others have failed to see your worth. Sometimes the greatest gift is the courage to walk away. With love and respect. Grandfather tears blurred my vision as the plane lifted into the sky, Charleston growing smaller beneath us. The weight of years of silent resentment, of swallowed pride, of diminished dreams seemed to fall away with each mile. I was finally free. When I landed in Florida, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Instead of Charleston's wintry chill, warm sunshine greeted me. Palm trees swayed in a gentle breeze, and the air smelled of salt and possibility. I checked into my beachfront hotel, changed into a light sundress, and walked to the ocean's edge. My phone remained off. Whatever chaos was unfolding back in Charleston would have to proceed without my intervention. For once, I wasn't responsible for solving the family's problems. The design conference began that evening with a welcome reception. As I mingled with fellow designers discussing innovative approaches and sustainable materials, I felt a professional confidence that had been smothered by family dynamics. Here, no one knew me as the helpful cousin or George's granddaughter. I was Elena Harrington, emerging designer with promising ideas and a unique aesthetic. Back in my hotel room that night, curiosity finally got the better of me. I turned on my phone to find an avalanche of notifications. 15 missed calls from Sabrina, 7 from James, 3 from Aunt Patricia. The text messages told a story of escalating panic. Sabrina, 12:30 p.m. Where are you? The caterers should be arriving. Sabrina, 1:15 p.m. Call me immediately. James, 3:20 p.m. What the hell, Elena? Sabrina is freaking out. No caterers, no preparation. Fix this. Sabrina, 4:40 p.m. Guests arriving in 20 minutes. This is unforgivable. James, 5:10 p.m. Wallace is here. We're ordering takeout. You've ruined everything. The last message came from an unexpected source, Henry Wallace himself. Ms. Harrington, I believe we have mutual acquaintances who, are currently experiencing an interesting Christmas Eve. Looking forward to our meeting on the 26th. Your portfolio is impressive. HWW. I stared at the message, wondering how he had connected the dots. Then I laughed. A real, uninhibited laugh that felt foreign after years of careful restraint. The mental image of Sabrina and James scrambling to explain the absence of their promised lavish dinner was both vindicating and liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I had prioritized my needs over their demands. The sky hadn't fallen, the world hadn't ended, and judging by Henry Wallace's message, my professional reputation remained intact. I slept deeply that night, lulled by the distant sound of waves and the absence of obligation. Christmas morning brought an unexpected peace. I woke early and walked on the beach as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. After years of orchestrating elaborate family Christmases that never included my preferences or acknowledged my efforts, the simplicity of watching the ocean alone felt like a revelation. Later, I called grandfather from my hotel balcony. "Merry Christmas," I said when he answered. "Merry Christmas, Elena." His voice sounded amused. "Florida agreeing with you?" "Very much so," I replied. "How are things there?" He chuckled. "Let's just say dinner last night was memorable, as predicted. Pizza on grandmother's china made quite an impression on Henry Wallace." I winced slightly. "Was it terrible?" "It was necessary," he said firmly. "Sabrina and James are furious with you, of course. They're claiming you sabotaged them deliberately." "I simply removed myself from a situation where I was being used," I said, surprising myself with my conviction. "Precisely," grandfather agreed. "Though I should warn you, they're threatening to contest my will when the time comes. Apparently, they believe your absence proves you're unworthy of any inheritance." The irony made me laugh. They've never understood that some things matter more than money. "No," he said softly. "They haven't. But you have, Elena. Just like your father." He cleared his throat. "Enjoy your conference. We'll talk when you return." After hanging up, I spent the day at the conference, attending workshops and networking with industry professionals. The freedom to focus solely on my passion, without managing family expectations or smoothing over Sabrina's demands, was intoxicating. That evening, instead of a formal Christmas dinner, I joined a group of conference attendees at a beachside restaurant. We shared stories, ideas, and laughter under string lights, with the sound of waves as our background music. I belonged here, I realized, not as an appendage to someone else's life, but as the main character in my own story. As midnight approached, I walked alone on the beach, reflecting on the day's events and the years that had led to this moment. The moon cast a silver path across the water, an invitation to follow a different direction. "Sometimes the greatest gift is the courage to walk away," grandfather had written. Standing there on the Florida shore, thousands of miles from the gilded cage of Charleston, expectations, I finally understood what he meant. 2 days after Christmas, I sat in the hotel's Ocean View restaurant, waiting for Henry Wallace. Our rescheduled meeting was set for noon, and I had arrived early to review my portfolio one final time. My designs, a boutique eco-resort concept that blended luxury with sustainability, represented years of work squeezed into early mornings and late nights, the hours when I wasn't managing grandfather's affairs. At precisely 12 o'clock, Henry Wallace appeared. Tall and distinguished with silver-streaked hair, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. Unlike James, who wore his ambition like an ill-fitting suit, Wallace's power seemed effortless. "Ms. Harrington," he said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to finally meet in person." "Likewise, Mr. Wallace. Thank you for making time during the conference." He settled across from me, ordering coffee before fixing me with an appraising look. "I must say, you're not at all what I expected from a Harrington." I tensed slightly. "In what way?" "Well, for starters, you actually show up to your own appointments." His eyes twinkled with humor. "And your portfolio speaks of real talent, not purchased prestige." Heat crept into my cheeks. "I take it you've met my cousins." "Ah, yes, Sabrina and James." He sipped his coffee. "They spoke very highly of you at their impromptu pizza party." I nearly choked on my water. "They did?" "Well, not initially," he admitted. Initially, there was quite a bit of frantic explanation about an absentee hostess, but after I mentioned meeting you here, they claimed you were the family's creative talent, said they'd been promoting your work for years. The audacity was so typical that I could only laugh. Even in failure, Sabrina and James were trying to capitalize on my efforts. Mr. Wallace, I should clarify. My work is entirely my own. My cousins have never seen my designs, let alone promoted. Them. He nodded, unsurprised. I gathered as much. Truth has a different weight to it, Ms. Harrington. It sits differently in the air. He leaned forward. Now show me this eco-resort concept that brought you to Florida on Christmas Eve. For the next hour, I presented my designs, explaining the integration of local materials, energy-efficient systems, and spaces that connected guests to the natural environment while providing luxury amenities. As I spoke, Wallace's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine engagement. This is remarkable work, he said finally. You've considered aspects that most designers overlook, not just aesthetics, but functionality, sustainability, and return on investment. Design should serve multiple purposes, I explained. Beauty alone isn't enough. It needs to work. For people. For the planet. And yes, for profit. Wallace sat back, studying me. George always said his son had practical creativity. I see that trait didn't skip a generation. He paused. Your grandfather is quite proud of you, you know. Mentioned it several times over the years. The revelation stunned me. He did? Indeed. Though he worried you were allowing yourself to be overshadowed. Wallace placed his napkin on the table. Ms. Harrington, Elena, I'd like to offer you a contract. Wallace Investments is developing a series of eco-conscious properties along the southeastern coast. Your design approach is exactly what we've been searching for. I blinked, certain I had misheard. A contract with Wallace Investments? An exclusive design contract. He confirmed. Generous compensation, creative control, and proper recognition for your work. He smiled. No relatives taking credit allowed. The opportunity was beyond anything I had dared to hope for. Financial independence, professional recognition, and the chance to bring my designs to life on a scale I'd only dreamed about. I'm honored, I said, finding my voice. And yes, I accept. As we shook hands to seal our agreement, Wallace added, one more thing. The flagship property will be in Charleston. I hope that won't be a problem. Charleston, where Sabrina and James would inevitably discover my success, where I would have to face them after my Christmas Eve disappearance. No, I said with newfound confidence. It won't be a problem at all. After Wallace left, I sat alone, watching the ocean and letting the reality of my new circumstance sink in. I had come to Florida seeking escape and professional development. I was returning to Charleston with a prestigious contract and a transformed sense of self. My phone buzzed with a text from grandfather. How did your meeting go? I smiled as I typed. Very well. I'll tell you everything when I return. His response came. Quickly. I never doubted you. Safe travels home, Elena. Things are changing here too. The cryptic message piqued my curiosity, but I pushed it aside. Whatever awaited me in Charleston, I would face it as a different person than the one who had fled on Christmas Eve. My return flight was scheduled for the next morning. I spent my last Florida evening walking along the beach, reflecting on the dramatic shift in my life's trajectory. The constant anxiety of appeasing Sabrina and James, the reflexive acquiescence to their demands, all of it seemed like a distant memory, a pattern belonging to someone else. As the sun set over the Gulf, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, I made a promise to myself. I would never again diminish my worth to accommodate someone else's ego. AI. Father had valued dignity above all else. And now, finally, so did I. The next morning, as the plane lifted off Florida soil, I felt none of the liberation that had marked my departure from Charleston. Instead, a steady determination had taken its place. I wasn't fleeing anymore. I was returning, on my own terms. When I arrived at Charleston International, a text from grandfather was waiting. Family meeting at the main house, 7 p.m. Your presence is requested, not required. Your choice. I smiled at his careful wording. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything to attend, regardless of my own needs. Today, I considered my options, weighing the benefits of confrontation against the peace of continued distance. In the end, curiosity won out. I texted back, I'll be there, but I'll be leaving when I choose to. The mansion looked exactly as I had left it, stately and imposing against the winter sky, yet somehow it felt smaller now, less intimidating. I parked my rental car in the circular drive and took a moment to collect myself before walking up the familiar steps. When I entered, voices were already rising from the study. Sabrina's sharp tones, James's defensive rumble, and Aunt Patricia's theatrical sighs. I paused in the hallway, straightening my shoulders before stepping into the fray. The room fell silent as I appeared in the doorway. Sabrina, elegantly dressed as always, narrowed her eyes. James scowled from his position by the fireplace. Aunt Patricia clutched her pearls as if my presence physically offended her. Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable, while Grandfather sat calmly in his leather chair, watching the tableau with interest. "Elena," Sabrina broke the silence, her voice arctic, "how nice of you to grace us with your presence after your little holiday stunt." I met her gaze steadily. "Hello, Sabrina. James, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Robert, Grandfather. Do you have any idea what you've done?" James demanded, stepping forward. "You humiliated us in front of the entire Charleston elite." "No," I corrected calmly. "You humiliated yourselves by promising something that was never yours to offer." Aunt Patricia gasped. "Such ingratitude, after everything this family has done for you." "What exactly has this family done for me, Aunt Patricia?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Besides treating me like unpaid help for the past 20 years?" "We gave you a home," she sputtered. "Grandfather gave me a home," I clarified. "And I've earned my keep many times over." Sabrina crossed her arms. "You've destroyed our relationship with Henry Wallace. He'll never take our business ventures seriously now." I couldn't help the small smile that crossed my lips. "Actually, I just signed an exclusive design contract with Wallace Investments." He seemed quite serious about that. The room fell silent again, this time with shock rather than hostility. Grandfather's eyes twinkled with suppressed amusement. "You're lying," James finally said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "The flagship property will be right here in Charleston," I continued. "Construction begins in the spring. You'll receive an invitation to the groundbreaking ceremony, of course." Sabrina's face flushed with anger and something else, perhaps the first glimmer of respect. "This is why you abandoned us on Christmas Eve? For a business deal?" "No," I said softly. "I left because I finally realized my dignity was worth more than your approval." I turned to Grandfather. "I believe there was a purpose to this meeting?" Grandfather nodded, suddenly solemn. "Yes, there was." He reached for a folder on the side table. "In light of recent events, I've made some changes that affect all of you." The study fell silent as Grandfather opened the leather folder. Even the crackling of the fire seemed muted, as if the room itself held its breath in anticipation. "As you all know," Grandfather began, his voice steady despite his age, "I've reached a point in life where arrangements must be made. I've always believed that wealth without character is a curse, not a blessing." Sabrina shifted nervously, her manicured nails digging into the upholstery of her chair. James loosened his tie, a thin sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. "After careful consideration, I've revised my will and estate plan," Grandfather continued. "These changes take effect immediately." Uncle Robert leaned forward. "George, is this really necessary? We've always understood that the Harrington legacy would continue through the family line." "Let me finish, Robert," Grandfather interrupted firmly. "For years I've observed how each of you carries the Harrington name. Some wear it like a crown without earning its weight. Others bear it quietly, adding value through actions rather than expectations." His eyes found mine briefly before continuing. "The Harrington fortune was built on innovation and integrity, qualities my son exemplified before his untimely death. Elena is the last of his direct line, and the only one who has demonstrated those same qualities." Sabrina stood abruptly. "Grandfather, if you're suggesting what I think, I'm not suggesting." "Sabrina, I'm stating facts," he replied. "While you and James have used the family name to open doors, Elena has been building something of her own, something substantial." He lifted a document from the folder. "The Harrington estate, including the main residence, the surrounding property, and controlling interest in Harrington Real Estate Holdings, will pass to Elena upon my death." The pronouncement hung in the air like a thunderclap. Aunt Patricia gasped. Uncle Robert's face reddened. James swore under his breath. Sabrina stood frozen, her perfect composure cracking visibly. "This is outrageous," she finally managed. "We are Harringtons too. We've dedicated our lives to upholding the family name while she's been, what? Drawing pretty pictures in her garage apartment? Creating? A legitimate business," Grandfather corrected. One impressive enough to secure Wallace's investment without leveraging family connections. James stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. This is because of Christmas Eve, isn't it? One mistake and you're punishing us? Christmas Eve wasn't a mistake, Grandfather said. It was a revelation of character, yours and Elena's. I sat quietly. Through the exchange, emotions washing over me in waves. This wasn't about money or property. It was about recognition. After years of invisibility, Grandfather had seen me. Truly seen me. Of course, Sabrina and James will each receive a trust fund, Grandfather continued, but access will be contingent on demonstrating meaningful employment or entrepreneurial effort. Provisions have also been made for Robert and Patricia's retirement. Conditional inheritance? Uncle Robert sputtered. George, be reasonable. Grandfather fixed him with a steely gaze. I'm being entirely reasonable. Wealth without purpose destroys character. I've watched it happening to my grandchildren for too long. Sabrina turned to me, her eyes blazing. You manipulated him. All these years playing the dutiful granddaughter while poisoning him against us. The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. I did no such thing. I simply lived authentically while you performed. Elena knew nothing about these changes, Grandfather confirmed. In fact, this decision was solidified by her willingness to walk away from potential inheritance to preserve her self-respect. Something the rest of you might learn from. James paced the room, running his hands through his hair. This can't be legal. We'll contest it. You're welcome to try, Grandfather replied calmly. But I've consulted with the best estate attorneys in South Carolina. The will is ironclad. Aunt Patricia began to sob dramatically. Uncle Robert awkwardly patted her shoulder while glaring at me as if I'd personally orchestrated her distress. I finally spoke. Grandfather, while I'm touched by your faith in me, this announcement could have waited. I didn't return to Charleston to claim an inheritance. Grandfather smiled slightly. I know that, Elena. That's precisely why you deserve it. He turned to address everyone. This meeting is adjourned. I suggest you all take time to reflect on what truly matters in building a legacy. Sabrina and James stormed out without another word, followed by a weeping Aunt Patricia and a fuming Uncle Robert. Their departure left the study eerily quiet. Just Grandfather and me surrounded by generations of Harrington history, captured in oil paintings and leather-bound books. You've created quite the storm, I observed, moving to sit in the chair beside him. He chuckled. Storms. Clear the air, child. It was long overdue. He reached for my hand. Are you angry with me? I considered the question. Not angry. Perhaps overwhelmed. This wasn't what I expected when I returned. What did you expect? Accusations, resentment, maybe eventually some grudging acknowledgement that I had a right to my own life. I shook my head. Not all of this. Grandfather squeezed my hand. Elena, I've watched you diminish yourself to keep peace in this family for far too long. Your father never would have allowed it, and neither will I, not anymore. Tears pricked at my eyes. I wish I had known him better. You're more like him than you realize, Grandfather said softly. He would be proud of the woman you've become. Proud of you for walking away when staying meant losing yourself. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire casting warm shadows across the study. Finally, I asked the question that had been lingering since his announcement. What happens now? Grandfather smiled. Now, you build your life on your terms. Use the Wallace contract to establish your reputation. The inheritance will be there when the time comes, but it doesn't define you. I nodded, feeling a curious blend of liberation and responsibility. And Sabrina and James? They'll rage, then scheme, then eventually adjust, he predicted. Perhaps they'll even grow from this, though I admit that may be overly optimistic. Later that evening, I returned to my apartment above the garage, which suddenly felt like a transitional space rather than a permanent refuge. As I organized my portfolio materials from the conference, my phone buzzed with a text from Henry Wallace. Heard about George's announcement. Not surprised. Charleston will be talking about this for months. Still on for our project meeting tomorrow? I smiled as I replied, absolutely. Family drama doesn't affect professional commitments. His response came quickly. Precisely why I chose to work with you, not them. See you at 10. The next morning, I drove to Wallace Investments' Charleston office with a curious sense of déjà vu. Just 1 week ago, I had been the invisible Harrington, arranging other people's lives while my own remained on hold. Now I was walking into a business meeting that would launch my independent career. The receptionist greeted me with unexpected deference. Ms. Harrington, Mr. Wallace is expecting you. May I offer you coffee? News traveled fast in Charleston. The receptionist's tone made it clear that my status had shifted overnight. Henry Wallace welcomed me into his corner office with a firm handshake. Quite the eventful holiday season you're having, Elena. I laughed despite myself. That's one way to put it. News of George's decision is already circulating. He noted, gesturing for me to take a seat. Charleston society loves nothing more than a dramatic inheritance story. I hope it won't affect our working relationship, I said. I'd rather be known for my designs than family drama. Wallace nodded approvingly. Precisely the attitude that confirms I made the right choice. He opened a sleek portfolio on his desk. Now, let's discuss your vision for the Charleston property. I've secured the waterfront parcel we discussed. For the next hour, we immersed ourselves in plans and projections, discussing timelines and budgets with no mention of Sabrina, James, or Harrington family politics. It was refreshingly professional, being valued for my skills rather than my familial connections. As our meeting concluded, Wallace walked me to the elevator. Elena, a word of advice from someone who's navigated Charleston's social waters for decades. I paused. Yes? The story being told right now is that you orchestrated a Christmas Eve disaster and manipulated your grandfather into disinheriting your cousins. His expression was serious but kind. You can fight that narrative, or you can rise above it and let your work speak for itself, considered his words. And what would you recommend? The latter, he said without hesitation. Success is the best revenge, though the truly successful never frame it as revenge at all. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, absorbing his counsel. As the doors began to close, Wallace added, Oh, and Elena, the Wallace New Year's Gala is tomorrow night. Your invitation should have arrived by now. I expect you'll cause quite a stir. The elevator descended, carrying me toward a new reality, one where I was no longer hiding in the shadows of the Harrington name, but stepping into its light on my own terms. When I returned to the mansion, a cream envelope with gold embossing waited in my mailbox. The coveted invitation to the Wallace Gala, addressed specifically to me, not to the Harrington family, as Sabrina had boasted. The irony wasn't lost on me. Inside my apartment, I spread out the architectural drawings from my meeting with Wallace, losing myself in creative flow. Hours passed unnoticed until a knock at my door pulled me back to reality. I opened it to find James standing there, looking uncomfortable and slightly drunk. Can I come in? He asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered, glancing around the modest space with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time the evidence of my work. The drafting table, the material samples, the design books. I always thought you were just playing at having a career, he admitted, picking up one of my sketches, pretending to be busy to avoid family obligations. No, I said simply. He set the sketch down carefully. Wallace turned down my development proposal today, said it lacked vision and sustainability considerations. I waited, sensing there was more. He suggested I consult with you. James laughed bitterly. My little cousin who I've been dismissing for years. What did you tell him? I asked. James ran a hand through his hair. That I'd think about it. He looked at me directly. Would you? Consult with me, I mean. If I actually tried to create something worthwhile. The request surprised me. It was the first time James had acknowledged my expertise in any capacity. I would, I said carefully. But only if it's a real partnership. No taking credit for my ideas, no dismissing my input. He nodded slowly. I can't promise I'll change. Overnight, Elena. But grandfather's wake-up call. It's made me realize some things. After James left, I stood at my window, watching the lights of Charleston glowing in the distance. Change was coming. Not just for me, but perhaps for the entire Harrington dynamic. As night fell, I opened my closet and pulled out the garment bag containing my one truly extravagant purchase from Florida, a midnight blue evening gown I'd bought on impulse for the conference's closing gala. Tomorrow night, it would make its debut at the Wallace New Year's Gala instead, the event Sabrina had so desperately wanted to attend, the connections she had tried to claim through manipulation. The circle was completing itself, but with an ending none of us could have predicted. The Wallace New Year's Gala was legendary in Charleston society, an invitation-only affair where business deals were sealed with champagne toasts and social hierarchies were reinforced through carefully orchestrated seating arrangements. In previous years, I had heard about it only through Sabrina's envious commentary and society page photographs. Tonight, I would see it from the inside. As my Uber approached the Wallace estate, a waterfront property even more impressive than the Harrington mansion, I felt a flutter of nerves. Not because I doubted my right to be there, but because I understood what my presence would symbolize. A changing of the guard, a disruption to Charleston's established order. The driver whistled as we pulled up to the illuminated entrance. "Fancy party," I smiled. "Yes, it is." The curved driveway was lined with luxury vehicles and uniformed valets. Guests in evening wear ascended the marble steps, jewelry glinting under strategically placed lighting. I smoothed my midnight blue gown, took a deep breath, and stepped from the car. The grand foyer buzzed with Charleston's elite: old money, new entrepreneurs, political figures, and cultural leaders. Waiters circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played in the corner, providing elegant background music to the sophisticated hum of conversation. I had barely handed my wrap to the attendant when Henry Wallace appeared at my side. "Elena, you made it." He offered his arm. "Allow me to introduce you to some people who should know about your work." For the next hour, I was guided through a series of introductions to architects whose names I had studied in school, developers known for innovative projects, even the mayor and her husband. Each time Wallace presented me not as George Harrington's granddaughter, but as Elena Harrington, the brilliant designer behind our new sustainable luxury project. The reactions varied from polite interest to genuine enthusiasm, but one consistent theme emerged. Everyone knew about Christmas Eve and grandfather's subsequent announcement. "Bold move, disappearing on your cousins like that," a prominent real estate attorney commented, eyes twinkling with amusement. "Charleston hasn't seen such delicious drama in years." I smiled diplomatically. "I prefer to focus on the future rather than family misunderstandings." "Wise approach," he nodded, approvingly. Though between us, Sabrina Harrington needed a reality check. That woman has been trading on your grandfather's name since her debutante days. As the evening progressed, I began to realize that the social narrative around the Harrington family was more complex than I had understood. While Sabrina and James had certainly cultivated an image of importance, many in Charleston's inner circles had seen through their performance. My Christmas Eve escape had simply confirmed what some had long suspected, that the Golden Harrington cousins were more facade than substance. I was helping myself to a glass of water at the bar when a familiar voice froze me in place. "Elena, I didn't expect to see you here." I turned to face Sabrina. She looked impeccable, as always, in a red gown that highlighted her dark hair and pale skin, but there was something different in her expression, a wariness that replaced her usual condescension. "Sabrina," I acknowledged. "You look lovely." She accepted the compliment with a tilt of her head but didn't return it. Instead, she glanced around the room. "Wallace seems to have taken you under his wing. Quite the turnaround from Christmas Eve." "Business and personal matters don't always intersect," I said carefully. "Don't they?" She took a sip of champagne. "You've certainly leveraged one into the other effectively." "I've done no such thing," I replied, keeping my voice level. "My contract with Wallace Investments is based solely on my design work, which you've never bothered to notice, let alone acknowledge." Sabrina's perfect eyebrows arched. "And grandfather's announcement? Was that also unrelated to your convenient disappearance on Christmas?" "Completely," I said truthfully. "I had no idea about his intentions until the family meeting, same as you." She studied me for a moment, perhaps searching for deception. "You know we're going to challenge the will." "That's your right," I acknowledged. "But grandfather made his wishes clear." "Because you've been playing the long game," she accused, though her tone lacked its usual bite. "All those years helping him, managing his appointments, listening to his stories, while James and I were building our networks and social standing." The irony of her statement struck me. "Is that how you see it? That I was manipulating him by being present and supportive, while you were demonstrating your worth by using his name to secure dinner invitations?" Sabrina flushed. "We were expanding the Harrington influence. You were expanding your own opportunities," I corrected. "There's a difference." A subtle throat clearing interrupted our tense exchange. Henry Wallace stood nearby, accompanied by an elegant older woman I recognized as his wife, Catherine. "Elena, I wanted to introduce you to Catherine properly," he said smoothly. "And Sabrina, how nice to see you again under more organized circumstances." Sabrina's smile tightened. "Mr. Wallace, Mrs. Wallace. Lovely event, as always." Catherine Wallace extended her hand to me. "Elena, Henry has told me so much about your design concepts. I'm particularly interested in the community integration aspects. You've proposed for the Charleston project. As we fell into a discussion about sustainable luxury and local architectural influences, Sabrina stood awkwardly at the periphery, a rare position for her. After a few minutes, she murmured an excuse and disappeared into the crowd. Catherine watched her retreat with knowing eyes. Family dynamics can be challenging, she observed, especially when the balance of power shifts unexpectedly. I never sought power within my family, I said honestly. Just respect. The former often follows the latter, Henry noted. Sometimes whether we want it or not. As midnight approached, guests gathered in the grand ballroom. Staff circulated with fresh champagne for the traditional toast. I found myself positioned near the front, close to the Wallaces and other VIP guests, another subtle indicator of changed status that would not go unnoticed in Charleston's hierarchy-conscious society. From across the room, I spotted James in conversation with a group of young professionals. Unlike Sabrina's obvious discomfort, he seemed engaged and animated. When he caught my eye, he raised his glass slightly. Not quite a toast, but an acknowledgement. Maybe Wallace's rejection had been the wake-up call he needed. Maybe there was hope for evolution, if not immediate transformation. As the countdown began, I felt a presence beside me. Grandfather, elegant in his tuxedo despite his age, had somehow materialized at my side. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, surprised. He smiled. "Catherine insisted. Said it was time I stopped sending regrets to their invitations." He surveyed the glittering crowd. "Besides, I wanted to witness your debut in Charleston society. Not as my granddaughter, but as yourself." 10, 9, 8, the crowd chanted. "Are Sabrina and James speaking to you?" I asked. 7, 6, 5, "They're adjusting," he replied diplomatically. "Change takes time." 4, 3, 2. "Happy New Year, grandfather," I said as the countdown reached its culmination. 1. "Happy New Year." The room erupted in cheers, embraces, and the traditional strains of Auld Lang Syne. Champagne glasses clinked, and for a moment, status and rivalries were forgotten in the collective optimism of a new beginning. Grandfather kissed my cheek. "Happy New Year, Elena. May it bring you everything you've earned and more." As the year's celebration continued around us, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past week. From invisible helper to recognized professional, from family doormat to heir apparent. The transformation wasn't just external. Something fundamental had shifted within me. The constant need for approval, the reflexive acquiescence, the carefully contained resentment, all had been replaced by a quiet certainty about my own worth. Later, as the party began to wind down, I found myself on the terrace overlooking Charleston Harbor. The city lights reflected on the dark water, and a crisp winter breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Henry Wallace joined me at the railing, both literally and metaphorically. I smiled. "It's been an illuminating evening." "You've handled yourself with remarkable grace," he observed. "Many in your position would be gloating or flaunting their newfound status." "That was never my goal," I said. "I just wanted to build something meaningful on my own terms." Wallace nodded approvingly. "You remind me of your grandfather in his prime, before Robert's influence pushed the business toward flashier, less substantive ventures." He gazed at the harbor. "George built with integrity. The properties might not have had the highest profit margins, but they lasted. They meant something." "I didn't know that," I admitted. "Few do anymore." Wallace turned to face me. "The Charleston project we're developing together. It's an opportunity to restore some of that legacy, to build something that honors his original vision, while moving forward." The weight of his words settled around me. Not a burden, but a purpose. What had begun as a personal rebellion against family dynamics had somehow evolved into something larger, a chance to reclaim and reimagine the true Harrington legacy. As I prepared to leave the gala, Sabrina approached me one final time. Her perfect composure had slipped slightly, perhaps due to champagne or the emotional strain of the evening. "I've never apologized to you," she said abruptly, "for anything." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "I'm not going to start now," she continued, her chin lifting. "But I will say this. I underestimated you, Elena. We all did." Coming from Sabrina, this was tantamount to concession. "People often see what they're looking for," I replied, "not what's actually there." She nodded once, then stepped closer. "The family name still matters to me, even if you think I've only used it for personal gain. Whatever happens with grandfather's will, with your new position, remember that we share that name." It wasn't a peace offering exactly, but it was an acknowledgement of connection, perhaps the first honest one she had ever extended to me. "I've never forgotten that, Sabrina," I said quietly. "Even when you did." She held my gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, her red gown aflame against the monochrome elegance of the ballroom. As my Uber carried me back to the Harrington estate, which I now viewed with new eyes, I reflected on Wallace's words about building something that lasted. The true inheritance wasn't the key mansion or the business holdings. It was the chance to redefine what the Harrington name would mean for future generations. The question now was, what would I build with this unexpected opportunity? And for the first time in my life, the answer would be entirely my own. By mid-January, Charleston had settled into its winter rhythm. Cool, crisp days gave way to chilly evenings, and the city's pace slowed from holiday frenzy to steady contemplation. The social buzz around my Christmas Eve disappearance and grandfather's inheritance announcement had begun to subside, replaced by more current gossip and speculation. I had moved out of the garage apartment and into the main house at grandfather's insistence. "No sense in you living above the cars when there are 6 perfectly good bedrooms going unused," he'd said with characteristic practicality. At first, I'd resisted the change, worried it might seem like I was prematurely claiming ownership. But grandfather had been adamant, and eventually I'd selected a suite in the East Wing, far from my childhood bedroom with its complicated memories, and far from grandfather's master suite, giving us both independence. This morning, I sat at the breakfast table reviewing blueprints for the Wallace project when grandfather joined me, newspaper tucked under his arm. "Working already?" he asked, pouring coffee from the silver pot Mrs. Abernathy, our housekeeper, had left. "Meeting with the environmental engineers at 9, I confirmed. "We're finalizing the sustainability features." He nodded approvingly. "You've always had good focus. Your father was the same way, could work through breakfast, lunch, and dinner if a project captured his interest." These casual mentions of my father had become more frequent since Christmas. It was as if grandfather had finally found a way to share memories that had been too painful before, and I treasured each one, piecing together a more complete picture of the man I barely remembered. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you," grandfather said, setting aside his newspaper. "About the family business." I looked up from my blueprints, giving him my full attention. "Harrington real estate has been drifting for years," he continued. "Robert lacks vision, and James has been more interested in using the company to finance his social ambitions than actually building anything worthwhile." I nodded, having witnessed this firsthand. "I've decided to step back in as acting CEO while we restructure," he announced. "And I'd like you to join the executive team as Director of Design and Sustainability." The offer caught me off guard. "Grandfather, I appreciate the opportunity, but I have the Wallace contract, my own clients. This wouldn't be instead of your independent work," he clarified. "It would be in addition to it and entirely compatible. The position would give you authority to approve or reject design elements of all Harrington properties, ensuring they meet the standards of quality and sustainability that used to be our hallmark." I considered his proposal. "What about Uncle Robert and James?" "Robert will remain as CFO. Numbers have always been his strength. James," grandfather paused. "James has actually requested a different role. He wants to lead community outreach and local partnerships." My surprise must have shown on my face because grandfather chuckled. I had the same reaction, but his proposal was surprisingly thoughtful. He suggested we establish a foundation to support local artisans and tradespeople, incorporating their work into our developments. "That doesn't sound like the James I know," I admitted. "Perhaps he's not entirely the James you knew anymore," grandfather suggested. "Your Christmas Eve departure and my subsequent announcement seem to have triggered some self-reflection." Later that morning, as I drove to my meeting with the environmental engineers, I found myself considering grandfather's offer and the changes in family dynamics that had unfolded since Christmas. Accepting a formal role in Harrington real estate would mean deeper entanglement with the family business, something I deliberately avoided for years. Yet the opportunity to influence the company's direction, to restore the values of quality and integrity that had been compromised under Uncle Robert's leadership, was compelling. It too wasn't just about buildings anymore. It was about legacy, not just receiving one, but actively shaping it. The meeting with the engineers went smoothly. Our discussions focused on innovative water conservation systems and renewable energy integration for the Wallace project. As we wrapped up, Henry Wallace himself made an unexpected appearance. Just checking in on progress, he explained. Reviewing our plans with evident approval. After the engineers departed, Wallace turned to me. I hear George is restructuring Harrington real estate, with you taking a key position. News traveled fast in Charleston business circles. He's made an offer, I confirmed. I'm still considering it. Wallace nodded thoughtfully. You're concerned about conflicts with our project? Among other things. Elena, he said, leaning against the conference table. When I decided to work with you, it wasn't just because of your design talent. It was because you demonstrated integrity when it would have been easier to compromise. If you accept your grandfather's offer, I have no doubt you'll maintain that same integrity in balancing your commitments. His confidence was reassuring. Thank you. Mr. Wallace. Henry, he corrected with a smile. We're partners now, not just client and designer. As I left the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. Sabrina, need to speak with you. Lunch at Magnolia's, 1 p.m.? I hesitated, then replied, I'll be there. Magnolia's was a Charleston institution, known for refined Southern cuisine and discreet seating that made it perfect for sensitive business discussions or awkward family reconciliations. I arrived precisely at 1 to find Sabrina already seated, nursing a glass of white wine. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down, her usual imperious tone replaced by something more tentative. Your message was intriguing, I replied. Is everything all right? She took a sip of wine before answering. I've been offered a position at the Charleston Arts Foundation, Director of Development. Congratulations, I said, genuinely surprised. That's a prestigious role. It's also a real job, she said with unexpected candor. Not just a vanity title on a board, but actual work with accountability. She met my eyes directly. I've never had that before. The admission seemed to cost her something. Perhaps a piece of the facade she'd maintained for so long. What made you apply? I asked. I didn't, she said with a humorless laugh. Catherine Wallace recommended me. Apparently my event planning and fundraising skills, despite the Christmas Eve debacle, are exactly what the foundation needs. I studied my cousin, seeing beyond her perfect appearance to the uncertainty beneath. Are you going to accept? I already did, she confessed. I start next month. Our salads arrived, giving us both a moment to adjust to this new conversational territory. Honest exchange rather than veiled competition. There's something else, Sabrina continued, rearranging her silverware with uncharacteristic nervousness. James and I have decided to withdraw our challenge to grandfather's will. This was even more surprising than her job announcement. May I ask why? Several reasons, she said carefully. Partly practical. Our attorneys advised that the case had little chance of success. Partly financial. Legal battles are expensive, and without access to our trust funds. She trailed off, and I realized how significantly their circumstances had changed. Without unlimited access to family money, they were having to recalibrate their entire approach to life. But mostly, Sabrina continued after a moment, it's because we've had to face some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about how we've operated in the world. She looked up from her salad. About how we've treated you. I waited, sensing she needed to continue without interruption. I'm not going to pretend we'll suddenly become best friends, she said. Too much has happened, but I am trying to evolve, to be someone who earns respect rather than demands it. The admission, halting and imperfect as it was, represented a seismic shift from the Sabrina who had ordered me to host Christmas dinner for her social climbing purposes. Evolution takes time, I said, echoing grandfather's words from New Year's Eve. But recognizing the need for it is significant. After lunch, as we parted on the sidewalk outside Magnolia's, Sabrina hesitated. Elena, one more thing. I found some of your father's architectural drawings in the attic last week. Designs he was working on before the accident. I thought you might want them. The unexpected gesture caught me off guard. I would. Thank you. She nodded once, as if sealing a pact, then walked toward her car without the dramatic flourish that typically accompanied her exits. I stood on the sidewalk watching her go, contemplating the strange new reality taking shape around me. My cousins, who had been antagonists for most of my life, were transforming, not into allies exactly, but perhaps into something more complex and authentic than the roles we'd previously occupied. That evening, I called Henry Wallace to discuss our project timeline, then spent several hours reviewing grandfather's proposal for my role at Harrington Real Estate. The position offered an opportunity to influence not just individual buildings, but the company's entire approach to development. The salary was generous, the creative freedom substantial, and the potential impact significant. Just before midnight, I emailed grandfather my acceptance, with one condition. I wanted to establish a scholarship program for design students from underserved communities, funded by Harrington Real Estate, and offering internships within both the company and my independent studio. His response came immediately, despite the late hour. Approved. Your father would be proud. As January gave way to February, the changes continued to unfold. James began his community outreach work with surprising dedication, establishing relationships with local craftspeople and artisans. Sabrina prepared for her new role, approaching it with the same perfectionism she'd previously applied to social climbing, but with a more substantive purpose. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia retreated to their beach house on Sullivan's Island, emerging occasionally for family dinners that remained somewhat tense but lacked the undercurrent of manipulation that had previously characterized them. And I found myself in an unexpected position, not just a designer building individual projects, but a steward helping to reshape a family legacy. One crisp February morning, as construction began on the Wallace project, I stood at the site watching the groundbreaking ceremony. Henry and Catherine Wallace were there, along with city officials, investors, and press. Grandfather stood proudly at my side as I described the sustainable features and community benefits of the development. As applause followed my presentation, I caught sight of Sabrina and James at the back of the crowd. They weren't there to undermine or compete. They had simply come to witness a family achievement, even if it wasn't their own. Later, as I walked the perimeter of what would become my first major commercial project, Henry Wallace joined me. "You've come a long way since Christmas," he observed. I smiled, looking out over the harbor. Sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. Indeed. He followed my gaze toward the water. You know, Charleston has always been a city built on appearance, the perfect facades hiding all manner of complexities behind them. It's refreshing to see someone building something authentic for a change. As the sun sparkled on the water, I realized he wasn't just talking about the eco-resort we were constructing. He was talking about the new foundation I was establishing in my career, in my family relationships, and in my sense of self. I had finally stepped out of the shadows and into my own light. 1 year after my Christmas Eve escape, I stood in the grand foyer of the Harrington Mansion, surveying final preparations for the evening ahead. Crystal glasses sparkled under chandelier light, elegantly arranged flowers perfumed the air, and discreet catering staff moved efficiently through the spaces. Tonight marked both an ending and a beginning. The official opening celebration for the Tidewater, the eco-luxury resort I had designed for Wallace Investments, and coincidentally, the anniversary of the night I had finally claimed my dignity. "Everything looks perfect," Grandfather said, appearing beside me in his tuxedo. At 81, he remained imposing, though he now walked with a silver-headed cane, more a statement piece than a necessity. "Let's hope this dinner goes better than last year's," I replied with a smile. He chuckled. "Given that this one actually exists, I'd say we're already ahead." The past 12 months had brought transformations I could never have imagined when I fled to Florida with my portfolio and wounded pride. The Wallace project had been completed on time and under budget, already receiving accolades for its innovative approach to luxury sustainability. Harrington Real Estate had undergone a renaissance under Grandfather's renewed leadership and my design direction, with 3 new developments breaking ground and a reputation for quality replacing years of mediocrity. On the family front, the changes had been equally significant. James had discovered genuine passion for community development, leveraging his social connections for meaningful partnerships rather than personal advancement. Sabrina had thrived at the Arts Foundation, her organizational talents and perfectionism finding productive expression in curating exhibitions and securing patronage. We weren't a picture-perfect family, by any means. Holiday dinners still contained moments of tension, old patterns occasionally resurfaced, and certain wounds remained tender. But we had evolved beyond the dysfunction that had defined us for so long, finding a tentative new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. "The first guests will be arriving soon," Grandfather noted, checking his watch. "I believe Henry and Catherine plan to come early." "I'll do one final check with the caterers," I said, smoothing the midnight blue gown I had chosen deliberately, the same one I'd worn to the New Year's gala, now a personal symbol of transformation. In the kitchen, the catering team was putting final touches on elaborate appetizers. The head chef, a woman I had specifically hired from a local culinary school's IA outreach program, approached with a concerned expression. "Ms. Harrington, we're having an issue with the main course timing. With 40 guests rather than the original 30, the plating will take longer than anticipated. Add 2 more staff to the service team," I decided, "and extend cocktails by 15 minutes. That should give you the cushion you need." She nodded gratefully. "Thank you. We'll make the adjustments." 5 years ago, even 1 year ago, this kind of decision would have triggered anxiety, a deep-seated fear of disappointing others or disturbing the peace. Now it was simply problem-solving, addressed with calm confidence. As I returned to the foyer, the doorbell chimed. Henry and Catherine Wallace were indeed the first to arrive, elegant and understated as always. "Elena, the house looks magnificent," Catherine said, embracing me warmly. "A fitting venue to celebrate the Tidewater's success," Henry added, handing his coat to the attendant. Grandfather appeared to welcome them, and the 4 of us moved to the drawing room where champagne waited on silver trays. "I was just telling Elena that tonight feels symbolic," Catherine remarked. 1 year ago, this house stood empty on Christmas Eve, and now it's filled with purpose and celebration. "Life has a way of coming full circle," Grandfather agreed. More guests began to arrive: business associates, design colleagues, city officials, and cultural leaders. Each was greeted personally, guided to champagne and conversation, incorporated into the carefully orchestrated evening. James arrived with his new girlfriend, a ceramics artist whose work was featured in the Tidewater's guest suites. The relationship had surprised everyone. She was talented but not socially prominent, genuine rather than strategic. The change in James was evident in everything from his relaxed posture to the way he actually listened when others spoke. "Impressive turnout," he commented, joining me near the grand staircase. "Grandfather must be pleased." "He is," I confirmed, "though I think what pleases him most is seeing the family finding its footing again." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's strange. A year ago, I thought losing my trust fund access would be the worst thing that could happen to me. Turns out it was exactly what I needed. Having to earn something changes how you value it," I observed. "Speaking of earning," he said, lowering his voice, "I've been meaning to talk to you about a project idea. A mixed-use development with affordable artist studios and gallery space, using some of the craftspeople we've been working with." The proposal was worlds away from the flashy, profit-driven ventures he would have championed before. "Send me the concept materials," I said. "It sounds promising." Sabrina arrived next, impeccable as always, but with subtle differences. Her designer dress was elegant, but less ostentatious, her greeting warm rather than calculating. She had brought Charleston Arts Foundation's newest board member, a retired Broadway producer who had relocated to the city. "Elena, Martin was just admiring the original moldings," she said, guiding her guest toward me. "I told him my cousin has an exceptional eye for preserving historic details while creating contemporary spaces." The compliment, offered without agenda, reflected our new dynamic. Not close friends, but respectful collaborators in maintaining the family's revised image and legacy. Dinner was announced at 8, and guests moved to the dining room where tables had been arranged to accommodate the substantial gathering. Grandfather took his place at the head of the main table, with Henry and Catherine Wallace in honored positions nearby. I sat across from them, with the mayor and her husband to my right. As the first course was served, Grandfather stood, raising his glass for a toast. "A year brings many changes," he began, his voice strong despite his age. "In business, in community, and in family. Tonight we celebrate not just the successful completion of the Tidewater, though that achievement certainly deserves recognition, but also the partnerships and principles that made it possible." Murmurs of agreement circulated through the room. "Elena," Grandfather continued, turning toward me, "has demonstrated what the Harrington name truly stands for. Not just wealth or social position, but innovation, integrity, and the courage to stand by one's convictions. The Tidewater represents the future of Charleston development, just as Elena represents the future of the Harrington legacy." Heat rose to my cheeks as applause filled the room. From across the table, Henry Wallace nodded his approval. "To Elena," Grandfather concluded, "and to new beginnings built on solid foundations." "To Elena," the room echoed, glasses raising in unified tribute. The moment was surreal, not because of the recognition itself, but because of the journey that had led to it. 1 year ago, I had been invisible in this very house, expected to serve without acknowledgement. Now I was being celebrated by the very people whose approval Sabrina and James had once desperately sought. But as I looked around the table, I realized something important. Their approval no longer defined my worth. It was pleasant, certainly, but not necessary. My sense of self existed independently of external validation, a hard-won freedom that had emerged from last year's painful reckoning. The dinner proceeded flawlessly, course after exquisite course served with precision and artistry. Conversations flowed, business connections formed, and genuine warmth permeated the gathering. It was everything Sabrina had tried to fake the previous year, made authentic through honest effort and clear purpose. After dessert was served, I excused myself briefly and stepped onto the terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The December air was crisp but not uncomfortable, stars visible above Charleston's historic skyline. Quite different from last Christmas Eve, isn't it? Grandfather's voice came from behind me as he joined me at the stone balustrade. I smiled, in every possible way. Your parents would be so proud of you, Elena, he said softly. Not just of your professional success, but of the woman you've become. Someone who values dignity above convenience and truth above appearance. I had a good example, I replied, linking my arm through his. Even if it took me a while to recognize it, he patted my hand. We all find our way in our own time. We stood in companionable silence, the sounds of the successful dinner party drifting through the French doors behind us. After a moment, Grandfather spoke again. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing a small velvet box. This seemed like the appropriate moment. I accepted the box, opening it carefully to reveal an elegant signet ring bearing the Harrington crest. The ring my father had worn and his father before him. Traditionally passed from father to son, Grandfather explained, but traditions evolve as we've learned. It belongs to you now, as does everything it represents. Tears pricked at my eyes as I slipped the ring onto my right hand. It was slightly too large, but its weight felt right, a tangible connection to the father I had lost and the legacy I was now entrusted to carry forward. Thank you, I said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. Inside, the party continued, glasses clinking and laughter rising as Charleston's influential citizens celebrated the completion of a project that would help define the city's future direction. In a few minutes, we would rejoin them, continuing to build the connections and relationships that sustained both business and community. But for this moment, standing under the stars with my grandfather, I allowed myself to fully appreciate the journey that had brought me here, from shadow to substance, from servitude to self-determination. You know, Grandfather said thoughtfully, in all my years of building this family's fortune and reputation, I never understood what truly mattered until recently. And what's that? I asked. That wealth without character is worthless, he replied, and that true inheritance isn't measured in property or bank accounts, but in how we carry ourselves through adversity. I thought of my Christmas Eve flight, the moment I had chosen dignity over obligation. That single decision had catalyzed changes I could never have anticipated, creating ripples that transformed not just my life, but the lives of everyone connected to me. Shall we go back inside? Grandfather suggested after a moment. I believe Henry wanted to discuss the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Tidewater. I nodded, taking one last look at the peaceful Charleston night. I'm ready. As we returned to the warmth and light of the gathering, I caught sight of my reflection in the French doors, confident and composed, the Harrington signet ring glinting on my hand. The woman looking back at me had traversed a complete circle, returning to the house she had fled but standing now on entirely different terms. The invisible Elena was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had discovered that her true worth had never been determined by how others valued her, but by how she valued herself. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what we receive from others, but what we find within ourselves when we finally have the courage to look.